Welcome to another VC Wisdom Pod with Mike Winterfield. Mike is a founder at Active Impact Investments, a VC, is a top 40 under 40, a board member, startup advisor in B2B sales, just like myself, environmentalist. Didn't call myself an environmentalist, but I'm definitely for making the world a better place, the planet more breathable and livable environment in this global warming. So very happy to have you on, Mike, today. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me on, Charles. Um, I actually became a venture capitalist about 8 years ago because of my interest in climate. So prior to that, I was in operational roles, kind of grew up through the sales organization of a couple of different companies. Ended up leading relatively large sales teams. I ran one sales team that was doing about $300 million a year in revenue. So I became the president of that company, and then became COO of another company, a software services company, and also co-founder launched a product out of that company. But yeah, essentially 8 years ago, decided I wanted to devote the rest of my career to climate, and had to figure out a way to be useful. And so my starting point was just trying to figure out who was doing interesting and innovative things in climate and how could I support them. Had always been really fascinated by entrepreneurs and innovation. And my theory was simply, to begin with, it was that I was paid relatively well as an executive of a larger company, and I was pretty sure that founders couldn't afford people like me, and felt like I'd accumulated some experience that might be able to help founders. Uh, and then tested that with founders. Founders appreciated it, and then I needed to figure out if I could raise money. And so, in raising money, just tried to look at where there was a gap in the market. And here in Canada, and we've experienced a lot of the same in the United States, there was a pretty big gap in the seed stage funding specifically when it came to climate. And so that's where we decided to enter the market.
Right. And I can see here, president at Randstad Professionals. I can also see that you had your own B2B sales company, Traction on Demand. Which one was your first exit there? And was that the pivot from you being a founder or president to you becoming a VC?
Yeah, so neither of those companies were my companies. Randstad actually bought sort of a small entrepreneurial company that I was a part of the leadership team on. So that was a large publicly traded company buying a small privately held company that I was part of the leadership team on. And then the second role that you mentioned with Traction, again, I worked under the founder there, a guy by the name of Greg, who started the company. So I joined several years into their journey. I think I was their 60th employee, and I left when they'd grown to about 300 employees. And then Traction went on to be bought by Salesforce.com. So again, bought by a large publicly traded company. So had a chance with both of those companies to be involved in organizations that were private equity backed, and eventually ended up selling to large publicly traded companies. So I think maybe some applicable experience to what we're trying to do to create value here in venture capital, right? To invest in some of these companies early that are growing and doing well and creating value, and then eventually look to exit those companies, sometimes selling to strategics like publicly traded companies, or sometimes selling to private equity, or sometimes looking for an IPO window.
And was there a liquidity event at some point, or did you just decided that you'd want to be a VC at some point and raise money from LPs yourself?
Yeah, well, I didn't really make a lot of money out of either of those exits. I was not a significant part of the cap table of either of those companies. So what I made would have been the equivalent of a sort of a typical management bonus. So yeah, no, any money that I put into getting venture capital started was just money I had saved up through salary and commissions and bonuses, and a 20-year career. and started with a very modest, very very small concept and fund. Our first fund was a 2018 vintage fund, and that fund was only a $10 million fund that we made 15 investments out of, and then we've been able to scale since then. So we did a $60 million fund after that with the 2021 vintage, and we've now raised over 100 million towards our third fund. That had the vintage for our third fund was it started deploying capital last year, so 2024.
And why become a VC and not launch your own company is sort of the question.
It's a great question. Honestly, I didn't have a great idea. Like I look at a lot of the founders that we back, and they have deep expertise in one particular field. So they're real thought leaders on it, or they have this tremendous passion about going like really hyper deep into a particular societal problem, and solving it. I wrote a couple of business plans and thought about what my one big idea would be, and didn't have one, and so had to sort of like check myself on that and say, well, where can I bring value? And what I realized was that I was actually pretty agnostic in terms of business models and types of companies that I had worked with before. What I actually really liked was scaling businesses. I loved solving that for any company, and I also really enjoyed having a tremendous amount of variety, and so venture seemed to fit the bill pretty well for me.
Yeah, it's a different game as well. It's like observing various business models, trying to see where you can cross pollinate, bring some help, hire people in these companies, and see which one needs more love and which one needs some cutting. Even it's a hard game. Did you had any exit yet since the 2018 fund?
Yeah. So the 2018 fund, like I said, made 15 investments, and we've had 5 exits so far.
Wow.
So pretty high percentage actually. And then our second fund made 17 investments, and we've had 2 exits. So 7 exits so far out of our first 39 investments.
And why the environment consciousness? What was your aha moment when it comes to this? Is this just you growing up in Canada? We tend to value environments there, go in the woods, go in the mountain, right? Enjoy the snow, the trees, and all of that. When did you get your aha moment that we were burning this planet up and you needed to do something about it?
Actually, you've described it pretty well. I think growing up, I didn't realize what I had, but I always knew that I was a big sort of outdoor enthusiast and nature lover. And if I looked at the vacations I would take or dream of taking, it was usually having these really unique experiences of getting away from the city and seeing wildlife, or seeing sort of nature. And then just basically through movies, podcasts, books, started becoming aware of some of the challenges that were coming. I mean, I think Al Gore did such a good job with An Inconvenient Truth and educating so many people, and so once I sort of become aware of that, and even I think travel sort of hammers that home as well. I went and visited Beijing about 12 years ago, and there was just like thick with exhaust, and made your throat sore, and there was dust all over everything, and then you fly back into beautiful Vancouver, and you realize how lucky we are to have the air quality that we have. And the simplest way I've put that to some of my friends is that there were people who were talking about sort of a dystopian future and saying, I hope that the world doesn't become like this if we overdevelop, or if we don't build using some sort of sustainable thought process. And for me, I like to point out this was not a future state. This was a current state in a lot of places around the world. So it becomes more about how can you fix those places, and then how can you avoid going down that same path in places that right now that we're lucky enough that are still quite pristine. But on the investment front, Charles, to be honest with you, like I said, I wanted to put myself to good use on the climate side. And so I had to try to figure out how to serve this market, right? Try to help founders and try to help investors. And to be honest, I would have been I would have been okay with finding people who were okay with modest returns or highest levels of risk, and would have just sort of been very transparent with what I found when I started doing the research and said, "Hey, look, this is how I plan to attack the problem, and this is what I think is possible to achieve." It was a really pleasant surprise for me to find out that, and I have become truly convinced that I actually think that the outsized returns, the best possibility for returns in many cases over the course of the next 10 or 20 years, is going to be tied to climate tech startups.
Yeah, and I had the same experience going to China and coming back to Montreal after the space, the cleanliness, right? So think a bunch of people against that, or global warming, or climate denials people, they should just visit the world, right? And
Yeah.
that would solve a lot of problems, not just the environment, right? Just like travel and see the world around you. I feel that most people, they invent scenarios because they're so close minded, they have never visited other cultures, and think that would do us a great favor. But now we're busy inventing problems with China and inventing wars that don't really exist, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the encouraging things to see is how much China has invested in clean power and clean energy transition. So it's amazing how fast you can go once you put the right sort of resources behind things, which is a big part of our thesis with the fund. Like get really talented, get the right people working on these problems and get them the right funding, and then we'll see success and movement.
I think that tariffs are devastating right now, but thinking about it, maybe they could, one, stop all that shipping and that pollution from China, right? That these objects to the US. And second, probably level up the quality of life of people there, to get them in a more Western style of living, and not like working in factories all the time. I think it would develop like additional industries. What do you think about that?
Honestly, I think the biggest negative impact so far from the tariffs and tariffs on and tariffs off and tariffs on and tariffs off has been um, a
Confusion.
lot. It's like a loss of productivity, right? Like I
Mm.
hate seeing that, right? So I think you have a whole bunch of people who've invested thousands or tens of thousands of hours across different organizations trying to come up with mitigation strategies of what if this happens or what if that happens. And it's just a breakdown in trust, right? When you have things being communicated and changing as quickly as they are, how can you invest as a business in a medium or long-term strategy? It's really driving people to make very day-to-day decisions. And it's pretty unhealthy from an investment standpoint, for sure, right? Like you have investors do not like uncertainty, and we are at sort of peak uncertainty. And so, look, I mean, honestly, I feel pretty fortunate that I do what I do because we have a 10-year outlook, right? Like we are running funds that invest for the long term, and so for us, it's more a question of, is what we believe to be true going to be true in 5 years, in 7 years, in 10 years? And administrations will come and go, and laws and bills and regulations and tariffs will come and go, and these are just like levers to create incentives of particular things. But anyways, that's my relatively short rant on tariffs. Is just that the thing that guts me right now is what it's doing to destroy um, efficiency and productivity, and what it's doing to destroy trust. To be honest, like I think we can see the trust that's been broken between the United States and a lot of countries around the world, which prevents being able to build big and incredible things together.
Right. No, it's very insightful. So it's business as usual for you. You're not holding back on investments right now. You're not being affected at all by it. Are your
No, I mean,
portfolio companies are affected by it though?
we did a bit of a stress test on our 39 companies, and again, we've sold some of them, so those ones we've moved on from, trying to manage or have to worry about. But anyways, across all the companies we've invested in, we only found two or three that were directly impacted by tariffs, and so we don't do a lot of investments that are physical goods being shipped from one place to another. We don't do a lot of hard tech. Not a lot of physical products. A lot of what we do is in the world of software and
Right.
services.
How did you get a home run rate that is as high as 33%? You said five exits on 15%. What's your recipe there? How do you select your startups? How do you select the founders that lead them?
Um, how much time do you have? I'm trying to think of what I can put into a short clip. But look, I think we have a proprietary system for measuring talent, and I think I really benefited from. You mentioned one of my early careers was in professional recruitment and ran Canada's largest professional recruitment company, and so I think I can say with confidence. I mean, I started in that company in the lowest level position you could be. I was an hourly, summer intern making $8 an hour and finished as the president of the company. So I know I was good at what I did within that company, and then to be promoted, whatever it was, 13 or 14 times. But in addition to that, we were the leader in Canada. So if I was, a top performer in the leader in Canada, then I knew that I had built some systems that could drive success and were repeatable. And so I was lucky enough to bring that into venture and to have like a true technique for comparing founders side by side, where when you speak to a lot of venture capitalists, especially those that invest at the seed stage, you'll get a pretty consistent answer when you say, well, what's most important to pick right? They'll say the team. And then I will ask a lot of our friends and competitors, well, that's interesting you say that. So what is your process for analyzing a team? And a lot of them will give sort of a shoulder shrug and say, well, you kind of get a good feeling or a bad feeling when you meet somebody. And I think I've got a pretty good read on people. And to me, that sounds like just a terrible process, right? Like that's not, I can tell you how many times I've been wrong by just going based on people that I like or that are charismatic or, that say some of the right things in sort of an initial meeting or presentation. So for us, it really comes down to sort of this like sizzle versus steak thing, right? It's like we really look for particular fact patterns around what people have done before and what we can reference on them and what sort of personality attributes they have. And we look for a couple of personal attributes to be above all else and score very high versus trying to get a high score in, just to give an example, like you could name 20 things that you admire in some of the best founders or employees that you've worked with. And you could try to find somebody that scored as high as possible on all those 20. Or you could pick the two that are most important to you and make sure that people are like a 10 out of 10 on those and be okay with some 7 out of 10s on some of the other attributes. And that's part of our system. We believe that there are a couple of attributes that people have to be a 10 out of 10 on. And so far, it served us well. Like we've had, as you said, we've had good survival rates that are well above the industry norm. We've had good graduation rates that are above the industry norm. We've had good exit rates, or DPI, a lot of people call it in the fund industry, that's above the industry norm. I think we're top 1% DPI for both funds across over 2,000 funds that have been analyzed by Carta.
Interesting. And yeah, tell me the most impressive like founder or company that you've invested in so far so that we can have like a clear picture of what that looks like for you. A clear story, short if possible.
Yeah, like it's I hate the question the most impressive because some of these people just there are so many that have impressed me a lot. But I will give you an example.
Your favorite child.
Yeah, I can't say favorite child, but look, there's one that's really kind of blown us away lately, which is it's a company called Jetson. They came to us with an idea of a vertically integrated heat pump installation company. Did not really sound all that interesting to us as venture capitalists because Not only is it hard to do software, it's even harder to do hardware, and then it's equally hard to do services. And they were basically saying we're going to do all three. And the key to doing all three was that they could speak to each other and make each other more efficient, and basically create a moat against all those that did sort of an insulated part of that value chain. And it allowed them to drive down pricing and create efficiencies. Anyways, Jetson, we invested in them when they were pre-revenue, had not sold a thing, and then within 6 months of them starting operations, they got to over $10 million in revenue. And that's, from our 7 years of investing, that's breaks a record for sure, from what we've seen in terms of initial, and they're doing it in all the ways that we want to see happen. So their customers are not installing heat pumps in their houses necessarily because they are environmentalists. They're doing it because this actually is a better product and this saves them money. And so we love companies that are, we call it market ready and capital efficient. So what's a way that you are not asking a consumer or a business to pay this green premium, like I want you to pay more because it's the right thing to do? We really try to avoid those types of investments. We're looking for things that are better, faster, cheaper. And so people are making a buying decision, whether it's a customer or a consumer, because it is already the better service or product available in the market. And it just so happens to also bring a really positive climate impact.
And usually, do you see that the eco factor in a product steps over the profit, or are usually the most efficient products, and the more eco conscious ones, the ones that generate the most profit? Do both go hand in hand, or does eco conscious means stepping on profits?
No, I mean, like I said, we're trying to detach ourselves from, maybe like a good illustration of this is, I think the wrong way to approach trying to create a positive climate impact is what companies did about a decade ago or 2 decades ago, which was that they had a corporate responsibility group. So that group basically took a share of the profit and success of the company and said, let's go do nice things. So there was not sort of organizational alignment to this is our purpose. And it meant that if one of those companies started to underperform from a profitability standpoint, this would be one of the first things that gets cut. So an example of that would be a company that says, we're going to plant a tree for every, whatever number of orders, or every dollar that comes in. That is not the kind of company that we invest in. So the kind of company that we invest in, the revenue is inextricably linked from the environmental benefit they provide. So basically, for as much top line revenue as we can possibly see growing, we're also seeing growing at the exact same pace the environmental benefit. A very quick example of that would be, like, we invested in a software company called RailVision. They have software that shows how to run trains more efficiently. If you're running a train more efficiently, then you can reduce the diesel consumption by 10 to 20%. So for a customer, that means 10 to 20% cost savings on diesel, which is very meaningful for a large railway. So that's why they're going to make that purchasing decision. It's obvious. I spend a small amount of money on software and I get a huge return in fuel savings. But if you think about that fuel savings, every dollar you save in fuel is directly correlated to a CO2 emission number, less diesel's getting burnt.
That's interesting. I never thought of it that way. Last but not least, I just want to know, Mike, what does a day today in your life look like? What habits you nurture to be more productive, smarter, and just better?
Well, I hope I'm getting more productive and smarter and better. But I'll start with a typical day before I get any better at what I'm doing. Yeah, I often say that the job of venture capital is 5 jobs. So raising money, deploying money, which has to do with like finding the companies and doing due diligence and picking. Post-investment support. So we talk about like how do we help those founders after we've given them money, and then of course you've got kind of like inside our four walls, which is like all the things to run a business and manage a team. And then outside our four walls, which is managing a brand and managing the community and showing up at, different conferences, events. So I try to kind of divide my time relatively evenly with 1 day a week attached to each of those 5 jobs of being a venture capitalist. And then in terms of trying to be better, I think like you just try to learn lessons over time. I've been doing this for 8 years now of what like within any of those categories, what are we doing that actually creates the most value, and what are the things that we're doing that either don't create any value and so we shouldn't waste time doing it, um, or sometimes even detracts from value. Like there are things that we have done that are well intended. They're not malicious. They're well intended, but it doesn't mean that sometimes they don't have negative results. So we have to pay attention to that. We track all that stuff in a document to try to learn and get better. And then our number one thing we're trying to do right now on the efficiency side is just like figure out the best use of AI. Right? It would be a long time before we're utilizing AI for decision making, but there's a lot of things we do that are pretty like routine manual tasks that would be very well served by just freeing up more brain space for the people on this team, and take away like the routine monotonous stuff that they hate doing.
Interesting. Well, Mike, thank you so much for being on today. Where can people find out more about you?
Either activeimpactinvestments.com or theactive.vc.
Thank you so much. So that was Mike Winterfield and Charles Cormier for another VC Wisdom podcast.